Now, hyperkalemia, I think it's pretty safe to appreciate the T waves in the anterior leads that are just absolutely astronomically tall here. You know, this is crazy. These are hyperacute T waves, is a term we call this. If your T wave is taller than your QRS, that means it's tall. That's kind of one of those things to keep in mind. But that said, this is not very common to see it get this tall, but it does happen. Imagine the story of a patient who's that hyperkalemic. Be thinking of someone who's like dialysis, that's missed some dialysis, end-stage renal, or someone who's on diuretics and potassium, like for a loop diuretic, and they were told by their physician, stop taking your Lasix, and they forgot to say, oh, stop taking your potassium too. So now they've been taking potassium, and now they're potassium 7 or something, and your potassium's through the roof. So again, you may not have a lab back yet, but you can get an EKG and you go, holy smokes. Or you can see this EKG and say, I better get some labs. So it's just an index of suspicion to get you in the right direction. Again, the exact opposite of that would be, instead of having hyperacute T waves that are super tall, if your potassium is elevated, the exact opposite happens. If your potassium is super low, you get real flat T waves that are almost non-existent. So again, with this, you may see what's called a U wave instead. So for example, you kind of see one here, or right down here beneath it, so kind of point down to that instead of blocking it out for you. You'll see that there's a little bump. That second bump is a U wave, and that would indicate that you have very low potassium. Hypercalcemia and hypocalcemia. This is one of those things that can cause, you're kind of, it's like a spring. You're pulling or you're stretching the EKG, causing you to have a longer or shorter QT. Hypercalcemia, if you got a lot of calcium in there, it's going to condense it and make it real short. QRS is really short. Your T wave, your whole QT interval is really short. And they call these Osborne waves when they are causing this little notch behavior in the downslope of your QRS. Exact opposite, hypocalcemia, it's stretched out. So again, your QT interval, so from here all the way over to here, it may be longer than 500. So again, like talked about Romano Ward with long QT syndrome, this may also be someone you go, oh my gosh, wonder what they have. And then you happen to get some labs and find out, oh, their calcium just happens to be low. So I'm not going to get too worried about it, but always think about this when you're worried about someone that you have on QT prolonging agents. Don't forget to check your calcium, because sometimes that will be just because of you. You're the one that caused it from your calcium drifting too low. And sometimes you have a patient who's bleeding post-surgically, and you've given them some blood, and the transfusion of blood, maybe your calcium's actually low, and you need to give some replacement. So just keep it in mind that there's more to it than just being everyone having some genetic breakdown. It can also just be something as simple as need some more calcium.